Keane advocated a plan he called the Surge.
I told him that we were in a crisis, that time was running out, and I said the only thing that can work is to bring the level of violence down. The way to do that is to secure the population, and we don't have enough forces to do it, and we have the surge forces to do it.
It would be a complete reversal of General Casey's light footprint.
Most of his advisors, as I understand it, said don't do it. It won't work, and it will cost us a tremendous amount in blood and treasure. He saw it as our last best hope and went with it.
On January 10th, 2007, Bush announced the Surge.
Good evening. I've committed more than 20,000 additional American troops to Iraq.
That decision, at a minimum, guaranteed that his presidency would not end with a defeat in history's eyes, that by committing to the Surge, he was certain to at least win a stalemate.
In private, with his national security advisor, Stephen Hadley, the president revealed just how unsure he was.
One point he looked up to me and he said, Hadley, do you think this surge strategy is going to work? And I said, Mr. President, I think it will. But I do think, Mr. President, it's our last chance to get this right. And he says, good. He says, if you ever decide that you think this surge strategy cannot work, you need to come tell me.
To implement the Surge, the president replaced General Casey with an unlikely choice, David Petraeus.
Perhaps it was a sign of how desperate the times were that, I got the nod. I don't know.
It's a central front for Al-Qaeda.
David Petraeus is an interesting figure, an intellectual, has a PhD from Princeton, enjoys talking to politicians and journalists. And in the Army, that's kind of three strikes. Princeton intellectual, likes Washington, likes journalist. You're out, fella.
Petraeus was a counterinsurgency expert. He knew what would have to happen.
I said, get ready, because it is going to get harder before it gets easier. We are going to take away from Al-Qaeda, Sunni insurgents on one hand, and then Shia militia extremists on the other, the areas in which they operate. We are going to fight them.
And Petraeus was blunt with the president.
And the president says, this is really important. We're doubling down here. And Petraeus corrects him. He says, we're not doubling down. This is all in. He recognizes this is it. If this goes bad, that's the end of the war, and it's not going to be good for America.
Thousands of extra troops, both Iraqi and American, will try to slow down the killing among Sunni Arabs.
The surge begins, but the president stands increasingly alone.
That spring, General Petraeus and almost 30,000 new troops initiated the Surge.
White House is calling its Iraq plan the new way forward.
Petraeus ordered tens of thousands of troops off the large bases and out among the Iraqis.
The priority had to be on securing the Iraqi population, and that this could only be done by living with the people. So instead of consolidating on big bases, which is the direction we'd been going in, we went back into the neighborhoods in Baghdad and other areas that were also threatened by this ever-spiraling sectarian strife.
The job was to separate Sunnis and Shiites. That meant fierce engagements with Sunni insurgents and with Shiite militia groups.
When you take the fight to the adversary, by definition, casualties are going to go up. And casualties went up.
Door to door, street by street, the American troops fought to seize control.
But what they often overlook is just how violent the surge was, because the Americans were dropping lots of bombs and using artillery and just about every heavy weapon system you could imagine to try to reclaim lost ground.
Petraeus's troops often found themselves in bloody firefights with heavily armed insurgents.
Spring 2007 was very difficult in Iraq. It was a scary time.
And that was very, very tough. And it continued to go up, and American casualties continued to go up to the May-June timeframe.
Ambassador Ryan Crocker worked closely with Petraeus during those rough first months.
early months of the surge were pretty horrible. We were losing hundreds of troopers, and neither Dave nor I could say it was going to succeed in the spring of '07. June was our worst month. We lost more than 120 Americans in combat.
It's a daily litany of violence.
At least 122 Americans were killed.
I remember talking to Petraeus, and he was ashen. It was a very rough month in Baghdad, and you really could see guys with their fingers crossed that month in Baghdad. You know, this has got to start working pretty soon. Petraeus was very worried in that period.
As the death toll grew, the political pressure intensified.